I'm Hugo.
And I'm Jake.
And it's time for another TBReview.
TBReview!
So, last time we looked at a Christian film, a Christian propaganda film, basically.
Yeah.
God is Not Dead.
Right, that was pretty good. If you want to see it, link right here. Look at that link. Okay.
Today's a little different. Today we're looking at I would assume, non-Christian film about Christianity. Today we're looking at the acclaimed documentary, Jesus Camp.
Yeah.
Which, if you haven't seen it, it is on Netflix instant streaming. It is truly an excellent film, although it will probably make you angry.
Yeah. I can't imagine that you'll get much enjoyment out of it necessarily, but Hugo and I were talking before, and Hugo mentioned that this is a really good documentary because it doesn't try to push an agenda, really. It's just kind of, there it is, here's the stuff we edited together. Yeah. Now you can decide.
And don't get me wrong, I think you can assume the position of the filmmakers, but it's not like they do anything other than they document what happens. Yeah. And it is a good film, but we're going to talk about it today and some of the things that happen in the film. Yeah.
So the movie begins, and it's just like kind of like B-roll, and it's a radio talking stuff, and basically the movie came out in 2006, and I think it was filmed in 2005 or early 2006. I can't really remember.
I don't remember anything.
But anyways, it was around the time when Samuel Alito was about to be appointed by George Bush. So kind of one of the overarching themes in the whole film is Christianity's role in government. And it's very interesting. And how they kind of bridge that gap and tie this whole Jesus camp in is they have this guy called Mike Papantonio.
Yeah, and Mike is actually a really cool guy. He's a lawyer, and he's actually listed in a book about the best lawyers in America, so he seems like a really cool guy. Yeah. He's the voice of reason, basically, in this film.
And he's a Christian.
Yes, he is a Christian, but he seems like the coolest guy, and he's all for separation of church and state, and he's actually concerned about the amount of intrusion religion is having in politics, because remember, this is 2006. George Bush is balls deep into his second term, in part thanks to Christians helping get him into office because
easy.
Yeah. So I can see that certainly being a concern of his then as well as now, but he voices his concerns, and that's basically our bridge into how we get to Jesus Camp. And
right. You have to remember during the time of this filming, and it was 8 years ago now, you still have a lot of anti-Muslim sentiment, and they bring that in too.
Right.
And it's kind of like this whole weird us against them sort of mentality that we're getting into.
Mm-hmm. So then we get to one of the early scenes is the kids' sermon at a church.
Yeah, it's a Christ Triumphant Church.
And they begin with what I would call a kid's interpretive dance routine.
Yeah, it's kind of like a Bible Man episode we did before, but even worse.
Yeah, and it's these kids doing a song and dance number about Jesus.
And they have like painted faces and shit.
It's about going to war for Jesus, basically.
Yeah, and it's weirdly violent. It's strange.
It's one of those things I would consider Christian cool quotes because they're detached enough from modern media that they know that some certain things are cool, like maybe this sort of style of music, but don't understand what makes it cool.
Yeah. So it doesn't work.
And it's actually kind of funny, if not a little disturbing, to see these kids doing this. And then we get our first view of...
I'll call her the main attraction. She's not really the villain, although I consider her the villain, obviously. But she's not painted as such. She's just painted as, here's this lady.
Yep. And her name is Becky Fisher.
She'll henceforth be called Crazy Bitch, though.
And she gives a sermon to these kids, and she gives a straight-up evangelical children's speech.
Like Satan is gonna fuck your life up speech.
And I like that she also says to the parents, also, we're selling these books for your kids so they don't go to hell. Come and buy these books.
Yeah, and then she's like, I don't know why they don't sell better. Because they're an evangelical book for children, Becky Fisher. That's why.
And then when she's done doing that, she says, hey, also, this summer camp is happening. We're going to take these kids and preach to them for several days. So why don't you come on and send your kids to us? She also talks to the kids, and she basically says to these children, and this sounds a lot like an evangelical a sermon, but it is to kids, so it kind of ekes me out a little bit. Yeah. She says, the world is a sick place. The world is messed up. I hate this evangelical inclination for saying that the world is just a terrible place.
They're always like, the world is fucked right now. It's so bad. You don't know anyone with polio right now. That's amazing.
But she's saying this to these kids, and she says, you're the generation. you're the generation that's going to fix this. And this is an overarching message of her ministry, I'll say, of her ministry, that these children, we need to train them up, and they're going to be the generation that's going to claim politics for the evangelical Christians. And then it's also funny, this is a little mean, but I'll say it anyway. Yeah. In that speech, she also says, people are selfish. They don't want to give up their meals. They don't want to go on a fast for the Lord. Becky, I don't think you've given up a meal ever.
No. And that's not fat shaming. That's being mad at a person for lazy shaming.
That's hypocritical.
It is. It's very hypocritical.
And then at the end of her sermon, they have, for one, they have something that you see a lot in this movie, and I think is probably just a part of preaching to children as an evangelical. You have them repeating over and over something you want them to say or want them to stick in their head.
Right.
And they have them repeat, God, I'm here to be trained. God, I'm here to be trained. And you can see this. We'll maybe show a clip. But it's really off-putting.
Yeah, it's pretty creepy. And you'll see throughout the film, and you'll see in a lot of actually Pentecostal churches and in very evangelical, very loud churches, they'll do kind of this rocking thing. They'll put their hands up, and there'll be noise in the background, like distorted music. And you can hear in this scene during the clip where the famous girl that everyone gets upset about is holding her hands up and crying. I think the one that's on the cover. And there's distorted music in the background playing, and later on in the camp they do a similar thing with a lady in her voice, and it's just rhythmic, like
and when I first saw it, I thought like, oh wow, the documentary filmmakers put off-putting music to make it seem creepy. No, that's the music they're actually playing.
You can watch them play it in the background. If you look closely, you can see them like fiddling with musical instruments, and it's clearly a tactic in order to elicit an emotional response chemically.
Yeah. So then we see Becky at her home, and we learn a little bit more about her and what she considers her mission. Mm-hmm. And she says she is so good at what she does, she can go into a park full of kids who know nothing about Christ and lead them to the Lord in a matter of no time at all. And that's a direct quote.
I feel like this is the part, if we had a camera, where I would go into a schoolyard, I would walk up to some kids, and I'd be like, hey, have you guys heard about this new superhero? He's real, and he runs around, and he flies, and he saves puppies from angry things. I don't know, wolves. The wolves kill puppies? I don't know.
Yeah.
But and then they'd be like, oh shit, fucking... They probably wouldn't say shit or fucking, but they'd be like, holy crap, man that I don't know, that I should probably run away from because you're a stranger. That's a believable story.
Yeah, and I also find it odd that she even considers that scenario a possibility, that she should go into some and just start preaching to some strange children.
I'd be so mad if I was one of those parents. I'd be like, bitch, it's fine that you believe that, but don't fucking... It's just playtime.
They're trying to play on the monkey bars. You're telling them they're going to be damned for all time. Right. That's terrible. And then she has another quote that again addresses the overarching theme of the movie, which is, and this is a direct quote again, kids are so usable in Christianity. She considers them basically tools to be trained and then used to go out in the world and preach the word of Christ.
Right. And she says, in a similar thing, she's like, I want to use them the way Islam uses them. I want them to be willing to lay down their lives for Jesus the way Muslim kids would for Allah. And it's like, bitch, no, you do not want, we don't want this. That's bad.
And she doesn't look at that sort of thing as bad either. She's just like, solid tactic, I'll use it. Yeah. And it's not even, again, it's not like that's a lot of Muslims. That's a small portion of them. It's like, again, 2006, I assume she's kind of swept up in, although she's still like this. She still has a website. So I can't say it was a 2006 thing, but yeah, she gets swept up in that sort of thing easily and says, you're going to do that, I'll do it better. So then we cut back to Becky at the church, presumably after she gives her sermon.
Yeah, and they have an awkward scene in a hallway with two kids.
One of the kids becomes one of the main characters that they follow throughout the movie. Yeah. Let's call him Billy Ray for now because of his rockin' mullet.
Yeah, Billy Ray.
She has this conversation with them. She's like, hi guys, I just want to talk to you about Jesus. Which is weird because they're already in a church. Clearly they're saved
anyway. They're open
anyway.
to the Jesus convo.
But here's something I've noticed in her and other evangelical Christians. And again, as I've said, I grew up in kind of a fundamentalist church, though it was Baptist, so it is different, but same sort of thing. the way they talk to young kids is so disingenuous. It blows my mind.
Yeah.
Why can't you just have a conversation with a kid? You can have a conversation with a kid about religion and be genuine and talk to them as a person.
Yeah. They're borderline pandering.
But it doesn't seem like she is. It seems like she thinks this kid is an idiot. And I don't think he's an idiot. I think he's sheltered. But I think you could talk to him like a person and be fine. But she doesn't do that.
She doesn't really pay attention to his Samoan friend very much, though.
It doesn't matter. He's not in most of the movie. I think his dad, The Rock, comes to pick him up. So then we get a glimpse of a kid's creationism show, which I have tried to find, and I found a copy of it. It was a terrible quality, though. I'm still hoping someday we can find it and do something on it. But again, we're looking at these kids, quote-unquote, learning or being told.
Yeah. And by the way, they're learning about evolution from a talking fucking dinosaur. A dinosaur!
Yeah.
Dinosaur.
These kids like dinosaurs, so they're trying to...
But
Yeah, I know. And then we see Mullet Kid, Billy Ray here, looking at his textbook, because he is homeschooled, and the textbook is called Exploring Creation with Physical Science. How did this textbook come to be is what I want to know.
Kent Hovind.
Probably. Or someone similar. Someone Kent Hovind knows personally, probably.
And then their cunty mother decides, I'm better than the American education system, and she says as much, and decides that, I'm gonna teach my kids every subject of everything.
She talks about global warming and says, do you know why this isn't right? And then says something, and then the kid says it back exactly to her.
Yeah, he's parroting the answers that she's given before. And while this does happen in public school, there's no actual learning occurring. I have taken teaching classes. I teach children. It's not teaching. She's making them memorize, and it's unnerving to both be an atheist and an aspiring educator to watch that sort of thing, because it's frustrating as fuck.
Because she doesn't want them to understand the reasons for the thing, because then they might think about it. She wants them to believe the thing that she says.
Right.
For instance, she says global warming isn't true because the amount of temperature change in this period was only this much. And it was a very small period.
0.06 degrees or some shit.
But it was only over a couple of years, and that's not how climate scientists do their job. They look over trends over very long periods of time. Yeah. And this is 2006, but especially now, the verdict is pretty much in. Climate change, probably caused by humans, is a thing. Yeah. And this kid is never going to believe that, because his mom just made him parrot it, that it isn't a thing, over and over, without trying to explain to him why she believes that.
Right. And then they have a couple really, really good quotes.
She says verbatim to her kid, and is trying to teach him this, has him repeat it, science doesn't prove anything.
Okay. How?
Anything? What an amazingly broad, untrue statement to say. Science doesn't prove anything.
Nothing.
Don't discredit it. Do you take any sort of medicine? What about medical science?
No.
Do you live in a home? How about electrical engineering? That's kind of a science.
Right.
And, I don't understand people who completely discredit science. I think they're trying to...
Biology?
I know. I think they're trying to discredit the whole thing so they can get past a few things that disagree with their religion, like maybe some things in astrophysics or biology with evolution.
Right.
But I mean, to throw out science altogether, that's ignorant.
But then the craziest thing, when she says science doesn't prove anything, the kid retorts, like Galileo, who gave up science for Christ.
Apparently, she's also his history teacher.
She's gotta be, because there's no way I would have taught that kid that.
Galileo did not give up science for Christ. He gave up science because it was either that or...
The people who follow Christ would have told him no.
Yeah, he wasn't allowed to publish any more books because he was the heliocentrism guy, right? Yeah. The Catholic Church said, no, you can't write that. Either redact your writing or give up science. And he was like, fuck. Okay, no more science. And then the mom says something else that I just find entertaining. She says, I consider there to be two kinds of people in this world. People who love Jesus and people who don't. Which is technically true, but I mean, you can create a dichotomy of anything, and it's true.
Yeah. Let's try a few. There's two kinds of people in this world. People who have played Batman in a movie, and people who haven't played Batman in a movie.
There are two kinds of people in this world. People who believe Arnold Schwarzenegger would play a brilliant Othello, and those who do not.
There are two kinds of people in this world. People who like coffee in the morning, and people who like to murder strippers in the morning.
See, that's not really a dichotomy, though, because those things aren't exactly opposite. See, this is how the game is played.
And then we finally get back to our voice of reason, Mike, and he's talking about global warming, and it's just so refreshing to hear a very religious man be like, no, of course, obviously global warming is a thing.
And not only that, he's saying, even if it isn't, how dare you say you can just fuck the planet just cuz?
Right.
Which is this guy's a lawyer, and he actually he's been in litigation against corporations for things like spilling into bodies of water.
Yeah.
So he is against corporate malfeasance.
Yeah, and he's basically like, well, a lot of people think like they could just do whatever the fuck they want to the planet because Jesus is coming soon. No, we gotta preserve this for the rest of the people.
Yeah, Louis C.K. has a really good bit about that, actually. He's like, what if Jesus came back? He'd be like, what the fuck is this shit? What are the polar bears in? It's oil. Why did you bring the oil out of the ground? I needed it to go fast. like, yeah, if you truly believe that there is a deity who gave you the planet, why the fuck do you think you just get to do whatever you want with it and, like, destroy it?
Yeah. And then, as a good cinematographer does, you juxtapose and you put an adult bookstore right next to a bowling alley. And then inside the bowling alley, we have the talking mullet and his friends, his peer group. They're all bowling. And what do we see? One of her very best friends in the whole world must have supplied her with some material because she's holding a chick tract.
My God, if you haven't seen our channel before, you don't know how much we don't like and also love chick tracts.
Oh man, we have a whole playlist.
Yeah, chick tracts are terrible. I can't imagine they've ever convinced anyone of anything.
No, but damned if she's gonna try, you know? So the little girl ends up walking over to what I assume she assumes is a stripper at night.
But it's just a woman.
It's just a young lady.
She seems fine. She's just bowling with probably her boyfriend.
Yeah, and she's like, basically, hey, God told me that you need him and stuff, and Jesus loves you, and she's clearly like, okay, little girl.
Well,
like,
she's
trying to be nice, and she seems like a genuinely nice person. She takes the thing and she courteously flips through it without looking at the pages, and then kind of sets it down. And it's like, it's this little moment where, and all the parents that she's bowling with are like, oh, good job, Rachel, nice job, Rach, and it's just this really uncomfortable moment, and you're just like, oh God. But I guarantee there are evangelical Christians who watch this film and are like, you know what? Good for her.
But it didn't. Do they get that it didn't do anything?
I don't.
It was just an awkward situation.
Yeah, I think the point of showing this is twofold. It's they're getting their kids to fucking proselytize, but also look how little effect it has on the people you're proselytizing to.
Yeah. Then we get a brief. She's not really in a lot of the movie, but her name is Tori. She's 10 years old, and she likes to dance, which is great. I think it's great for everyone to have a hobby or things they love to do. And she likes to dance, but she says she feels guilty for dancing sometimes because she feels like sometimes she stops doing it for the Lord and starts doing it in quotes for the flesh, which is something from the Bible.
It's so sad because she's clearly enjoying herself. They show a short clip of her dancing to Christian rock or whatever, and she talks about how much she really likes the music and how much she enjoys dancing, and she's clearly happy when she's dancing. And this 10-year-old girl has to feel guilt over doing something harmless that she enjoys. It's not like she's poking the eyes out of woodland animals. she's just dancing.
It's like she's got the town from Footloose in her fucking brain.
Yeah, that's the most joyful moments that you could ever have as a child.
She needs a brain Kevin Bacon immediately. She also references, by the way, she's like, I don't like popular singers like Britney Spears or Lindsay Lohan. This movie was made in 2006. That reference is... That is
such a slim that was the year you could make that reference, and she fucking nailed it.
I know. We have her and her siblings. She's also homeschooled, I presume. Doing the pledge, and it's not the Pledge of Allegiance to the United States, although they might do that as well. It wouldn't surprise me. They do something that I actually had to do in my Christian school.
And I was very surprised. When I had seen this is the second time I've seen this. The first time I just watched it in my room one day. And I thought this was like a family thing.
No.
But apparently this is a thing that you do that happens around the country, and they pledge allegiance to the Christian flag.
Which is the least imaginative flag, let's be honest.
It's a flag with a cross.
Yeah. And then they pledge allegiance to the Bible. They both have their separate
That's
pledges.
crazy to me.
And I remember doing this as a kid. And we did it every day at school, just like you might in a public school as a kid, to the American flag. But we would do the American flag, then we would do the Christian flag, then we would do it to the Bible, which is just crazy.
And then we finally get to the camp, because this movie is called Jesus Camp after all, and we are at the Kids on Fire summer camp, and it's on Devil's Lake.
Irony. And the crazy bitch.
One of the most annoying scenes, in my opinion. Crazy bitch is walking through the we'll call it the presentation arena area. It's basically a hall with seats, and she's like, "Hey, we should pray over the seats." Okay, and then a bunch of people pray over the seats, and she's like, "Why don't we pray over the computers and the PowerPoint presentations and the lighting and the electricity
and she's like
the microphone?"
I know, and she's like, "Devil, you're not gonna fuck us up. You know what's gonna fuck you up? It looks like you're running Windows 95 for that PowerPoint presentation.
Yeah.
Maybe stop praying for 5 minutes, go get an upgrade."
Yeah, get a Mac. I bet in 2006, I remember distinctly, they were making the cool different colored ones.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
it just seems interesting to me that she thinks this is more important than maybe...
The devil is apparently very tech savvy, and he could blue screen you immediately.
The devil made the font sizes change, so now you can't read what I said in the
Comic
PowerPoint.
Sans!
And then we get the first meeting of the children in the meeting hall, and we get more of what I call Christian cool, this kind of song/rap called "Who's in the House? JC."
JC.
And they're quote kicking it for Christ.
Yeah. Do people kick it anymore?
I don't. In 2006, people were not kicking it.
Urban fans, you know who you are. Are you still kicking it like DJ Jazzy Jeff?
And then the crazy bitch Becky comes up and she gives a talk about the devil's tactics and how he'll be tempting you with sin. She uses these stuffed animals as an analogy. First a small cub and cub.
It's like a little lion, and then she picks up a big lion, and then she swings around by the tail and calls it a tiger, which annoyed me. And she's basically saying, like, you know, if you sin a lot, you're gonna go to hell.
And then at 34 minutes in, she says one of those things from this movie that just makes me so happy for some reason. Not happy. It annoys me, but at the same time, it's like, you're so out there.
Yeah.
No one can take you seriously. And I quote, warlocks are enemies of God. She's referencing Harry Potter because, as you would imagine in 2006, as is now, Harry Potter is a very popular children's book and movie series.
Don't believe us? Here's the clip.
Warlocks are enemies of God. And I don't care what kind of hero they are. They're an enemy of God. And had it been in the Old Testament, Harry Potter would have been put to death.
I've never understood this argument from Christians.
No,
evangelical Christians, I could say. She's by no means representative of most of the Christian population. Do they think warlocks are real? I don't understand.
I don't know.
And again, we have her talking to the kids as you are going to be the greatest generation. You will be righteous.
And holy and... vote for Republicans.
And then her sermon takes a downturn. She goes, there are some kids here that are phony and hypocrites. And she's saying, like, when you're with your friends, you're not like you are at church. You swear and you read Harry Potter and do bad things. And she says, we can't have phonies in the army of God. And there's always this army analogy.
Yeah,
and she gets these kids to fucking break down.
Yeah,
she
they're not
wrecks,
just and they're not just crying a little bit.
They are wrecked emotionally.
Yeah.
If this isn't some sort of emotional abuse, I honestly don't know what is. She's telling these kids, yeah, you know all those things kids do and all kids do? The things that you do, you're bad for them. You should feel bad. Bitch, these kids are like 6 years old. 6, and some are older, but the ones that are crying are mainly like 5, 6, 7.
Yeah.
She is ruining these children and making them think they are terrible people just for being people.
And then you get some guilty kids talking about how, sometimes I, have faith issues. It's like they're a kid.
And you see why some people have such a problem going away from what the Bible says, because you see this kid who directly says, sometimes I have trouble believing what the Bible says.
And he feels so guilty about it.
And they kind of guilt him into it. Like, clearly they're trying to get him. And you see how hard they must just emotionally beat this out of some kids. And of course, this isn't all Christians. This is strictly strict evangelical Christians. But you can see where some of these people come from.
Oh, absolutely. The kids, they get to go back into their dorms or whatever, and they like have flashlights and it's dark. And it's actually a really good moment where they finally show a scene where the kids actually get to be kids for a little bit. But of course, an adult comes into the room and he's like, ghost stories are all good and well, but they don't really honor God, now do they?
Which is...
Does everything have to fucking honor God? When I take a shit, do I have to be like, God, this shit's for you, man. Big love. Like...
Not to mention that ghost stories don't really honor God. I want one of the kids to be like, what about the Holy Spirit? Shut the fuck up, Tyrone.
The one black kid that was allowed.
Yeah. And then we see her room of props, because she says, kids are visual learners, so I use all these props. So she brings up Barbie dolls and stuff.
Yeah, and like a balloon, and then she has like a brain. And it's like... Ugh.
And she's like, this is how I manipulate your kids. No, she doesn't say that, but I feel like it's implied.
Yeah.
And then I'd like to think she has all these props, and I'd like to think she thinks, like, God damn it, if it weren't for that fucking carrot top, I wouldn't have to deal with these kids. I could be on the road.
I would have made it big, Ma!
Then we cut to Rachel, who's drawing, because I think she likes to draw. They show her drawing several times in the film. And she talks about what she calls dead churches, and it's so interesting in what she's saying, because I think you can kind of tell when a kid is talking about something
that they've heard before someone else talk about.
Yeah. You can tell she doesn't really necessarily think about this. It's just something she's parroting because she's heard it. She says, there are these dead churches. They sing like 1 or 2 songs and don't do anything. The church I go to is really great.
And you can tell it's not something that she would actively think about on her own, because I guarantee she hasn't visited that many other churches in her life. She's only ever been to the one. How can she know that they're different? For all she knows, they're all exactly the same. You don't have that kind of perspective as a 6 or 7 year old kid. But so she assumes that the only way to really praise the Lord is to be really fucking obnoxious about it, apparently.
And then we have Mullet Man.
Mullet Man, Billy Ray.
He's out in the woods practicing a sermon because he's been asked to basically, hey, you want to give a kid sermon?
Yeah, well, that's where I go. I usually go to the woods.
And it's interesting because you can see he's clearly imitating every preacher he's ever seen.
He even does the face thing, and he'll shake his head and be like, I believe it.
Yeah, and there are different styles of preaching depending on the denomination. You can see his evangelical spirit in it. He's shaking his fist.
He's pretty good at it, honestly. And I saw an interview with him after this movie was done, and I am fairly confident he still does preaching.
That wouldn't shock me.
No, it wouldn't shock me either.
He's clearly, especially by the people in the movie, you see them encouraging him to go forward with it.
Far better haircut, though.
Yeah. Then later they get to this part where they say, they took Jesus out of schools, they took prayer out of schools, which they didn't. The only thing that the government has ever said you can't do in schools as far as religion is you can't, lead it. You can't have administrators saying, okay, now we're going to have a time of prayer. You can't endorse a certain religion.
Right.
That's just part of separation of church and state.
Yeah. So
and it protects Christians as well as everyone else.
Yeah, absolutely. And
can you imagine in some areas someone saying, okay, we're gonna pray towards Mecca right now? Like, no, you can't do that. That's part of it. Christians can't actively preach in schools, nor can anyone else. That's part of the deal. That's good.
Yeah, and so they make effigies of the government,
which are just coffee cups that they write government on.
Yeah, and then they give the kids hammers, and then they destroy the government.
Which is weird.
That's a bad thing to do.
Yeah.
You don't want to teach the kids that, oh yeah, by the way, not having a government is ideal.
Yeah. We're just anarcho-capitalists, man. Just fuck it. Fuck it. So we cut to the mullet at some sort of cave, because these kids are allowed to just wander and go into caves. I'd be, as a grown man, afraid to go into a cave.
But this fucking not going into a cave. Even if like, it's raining and I need shelter, I'm sitting at the edge of the outside of the cave. Yeah. Like, I'm as far as I can get.
But this kid then sits and they interview him a little bit, and he says, you know, this country has changed so much, and it used to be a Christian nation, and it's just become immoral. And it's like, dude,
really, Billy Ray? You remember the good old days?
You're like 11. And then at 53 minutes in, we
Yeah.
get to one of the weirdest scenes in the movie.
Yeah. So this old lady walks in with a life-size cutout of George W. Bush, and she's like, say hi to the president, everybody. Okay, and then I want you to pray for him. And then she puts it down, and then quite literally they're worshiping the cutout of George W. Bush.
They like lay hands on him, and I know they're praying for him or whatever, but it's still so creepy. They're laying hands on him and touching him, and they're like,
yeah, and then they just chant "One Nation Under God" the whole time, and it's a great cutout of George W. By the way, he's got that funny fucking smirk on his face, like candy.
Then after the George W. Bush thing ends, they have a guy come up.
Looks a lot like the Donut Man.
Yeah, kind of a guest speaker. And I remember this, too, from when I was in Christian school. I think there are a certain type of children's pastor that goes around, and it's basically their job, because they're good at relating to kids. And most of these evangelicals, as we talked earlier, when they talk to kids about the topic, it seems awkward. It seems like they don't really know how to talk about the kids with it. This kind of person knows how to talk to kids, and you can see it. He's very good at talking to them and getting their attention.
Which makes me uncomfortable.
I know. And he brings Levi up, which is the name of the mullet kid, by the way.
Yeah.
And he said, God had a plan for you. And he said, I want Levi to become a Christian early and live a life and become a preacher. And he says, and he gives this whole like synopsis of what his life could be like. And he's like, you like that, Levi? And Levi's like, yeah, I like that a lot. And this guy then goes, everyone's life is written in a book beforehand by God. And if you can't tell, this guy's going to be anti-abortion.
Right.
I'd like to imagine me going, so God was like, Adolf Hitler, he's gonna be a failed painter. He's gonna be in World War I. It's not gonna go so well. He's gonna be appointed chancellor. He's gonna go ahead and become the leader of Nazi Germany and kill millions of Jews and other people. This argument doesn't really hold up. But then he talks about, well, it's true. He then, again, his whole thing is anti-abortion. He brings out this case in which he keeps little models of quote-unquote fetuses at different stages of development.
Which is, what a weird container to hold plastic fetuses in. Why do you have that around? Like, I get it, that's your... Who made that for you? Is there a store that sells those? Or did he have to, like, sit in his, like, place and, like... craft it.
Yeah. What makes me mad about this, though, is if you look at, and we can show you pictures of the models, he says, at the biggest one, he's like, this is a fetus at 7 weeks. No, it's not. That is the least accurate medical model of what a fetus looks like at 7 weeks that I've ever seen. They just basically made a tiny baby. Yeah. That's not what a fetus looks like at 7 weeks. Have you never seen what a fetus looks like in its development? Don't get me wrong. You can make arguments for or against abortion. I understand that. And I think that's a discussion everyone should have. When is abortion appropriate and not? And when is it okay to do and when is it not?
But you don't have to be disingenuous about it.
He's saying, like, it's a tiny baby. It's really not. It doesn't look like a baby at all. I mean, maybe a little bit. It might be bipedal at that point. It has the legs. It has the arms.
Who cares? Even if it did look like that, how many born children are that size? 0. Because they fucking will die if they're born that soon. And you probably wouldn't even notice. It'd come out in your pants and you'd be like, oh. Oh, look, there's a tiny thing in my pants now. That was a baby. Oops, sat on it.
It's just, I don't like the disingenuous nature of his argument is all. I've heard good arguments for pro-life. I mean, I disagree with it, obviously, but I've heard rational arguments. I mean, Christopher Hitchens, an atheist, was pro-life, and he's a perfectly rational person, but it seems like most of the people behind the pro-life movement are not at all. At an hour and 5 minutes, we see the mullet go to a megachurch headed by Ted Haggard. I don't know if any of you remember Ted Haggard.
I remember Ted Haggard.
He is
not from personal experience, though.
Yeah, he was an evangelical preacher.
Yep. Good-looking guy. Loud.
And in this clip, he is preaching against homosexuality.
Yeah, he's pretty good at his job, though.
Unfortunately, several months after this was filmed...
Yeah. In 2006, by the way.
He was
the same year this comes out.
He was caught having sex with a man.
Not just having sex with a man, you're cheapening it a little bit. The guy's name is Mike Jones, who, if you were around in 2006, you remember that rapper. It wasn't that rapper. So this guy named Mike Jones, he's a male prostitute. Ted Haggard calls this male prostitute up and is like, hey Mike, meet me at this hotel. Oh, by the way, bring the meth.
The meth. He calls it the meth. Not like... bring some methamphetamine. I'd like to try it. He's done enough meth where he's like, just bring the meth.
Just bring... Mike, bring the meth. And then he says he got a massage from him, but then they ended up masturbating together and then doing meth. Now, I don't know about you, But when I hang out with my friends, sure, maybe a penis or two will come out. But we rarely masturbate together. That's just weird.
Especially not when on meth. You have so many other things to do. You're on meth. You'd want to do more meth.
Yeah. I don't have time to masturbate. There's a bag of meth.
So then Ted Haggard meets Senior Mullet, and Ted Haggard is kind of an asshole to this kid.
Yeah, he's weird. So he's like, hey, man, do you like preaching? And the kid's like, well, yeah, I'm a kid. I have dreams, and this is one of my dreams. And Ted Haggard's like, well, let me shit on that for you.
He goes, well, you know, some people, they might just like you because you're a kid, and it's interesting, so you better do that now, or get some content, because by the time you're 30, no one will give a shit. And
it's like, whoa, Ted Haggard, he's not infringing on your fucking territory.
And I'd like to imagine Ted Haggard immediately when the cameras went off said, I gotta go get a massage, guys, I'll see you later. And then finally we get kind of a culmination. We get Mike talking to Becky on the phone.
Yeah, she called into his radio show.
I assume it was set up as an interview, but yeah. He's very level-headed. He deals with her a lot better than I think I would.
Yeah.
But she basically says, you know, we got to teach these kids because by the time they're 8 or 9, whenever they've learned at that point, it's basically going to stick. And he says, you know, isn't that kind of disingenuous?
Yeah.
Isn't that wrong? You call that teaching, but I would call that indoctrination. And she basically goes, yeah, you're saying that like it's a bad thing. She says, like every other church does it. Again, she brings up Islam, saying people in Islam indoctrinate their kids. And she goes, well, then we can do it. And she says, verbatim, I want to see more churches do it.
Bitch, it's not an arms race.
I don't understand. He talks about separation of church and state and how you can't intrude on politics. Right. And she says, you know, I love democracy. It's the greatest system in the world. And she says, but that's the thing. It is of the world. It's flawed. And she says, the problem with democracy is we have to give equal rights to everyone, which is such an honest statement from her. And she treats it as if it's a bad thing. I've never thought to myself, man, damn, too bad we have to give equal rights to everyone.
Yeah.
No.
Bitch, you wouldn't have had equal rights probably within your lifetime. Well, this isn't a bad thing. Equal rights is a good thing. The majority rules in democracy, usually, how it's supposed to work, because the majority wants the rights to be given to the minority.
Yeah, minorities are protected from majorities. That's part of
as
government.
Part of the Constitution.
Yeah.
So
she's basically saying, I want Christians to have privilege where other people do not. I want to have the right to do my religion. I just don't think you people should have the right to not do it or do other religions. And I'll give her one thing. She's being perfectly honest. I think this is something a lot of people in the evangelical Christian right-wing sphere might think, but they don't say it. Yeah. She says it, and that takes balls. And I still think she's terrible and wrong and a bitch, but she said it, and there's that. And then the interview ends, and he's very polite, which is good of him. That's great of him. And she just says, okay, bye, in kind of a snarky way.
Yeah.
And then we have Becky driving around, and she basically says, you know, it's my mission to get the message out there. I have to. Yeah. I have to. And that's her kind of closing statement, just saying, you know, I need to spread this message as much as I can. And then she's going through a car wash, and over the radio is I don't know who it is. It's some sort of...
It's just a Christian evangelical station.
Talking about how Christian evangelicals will rise and will take the country over, and we will have control.
And then he makes a really interesting analogy where he's like, India is the most religious country in the world, and Sweden is the most irreligious country in the world, and we're a bunch of Indians being led by Swedes.
Which is he's basically just saying, we're religious people being led by secularists, which for one, the government's supposed to be secular. That's the point, because not everyone is in... quote, Indian, you know what I mean? Not everyone's religious.
Right, but at the same time, there are very few openly atheistic or non-religious government officials in the States. So it's like, how can you even think that? Just because they're not super religious doesn't mean they're not religious.
Yeah.
And by the way, Sweden's the happiest country on the planet.
Yeah.
Not really a bad thing to aspire to be.
If someone was like, hey, you have to move out of the country, you either you have to pick between India or Sweden. Sweden.
The food of India would give me like a quarter second of like, maybe, but no, I'm fucking right to Sweden, and I'm going to be perfectly happy.
Pooping in squat toilets would probably not make me happy in India.
Yeah,
arguably that's healthier for your colon.
I know a lot about India. I've seen Slumdog Millionaire.
So at the end credits, we then have the kids handing out Chick tracts to people and just having conversation. Yeah. And the kids are basically like, do you think these people are ignoring us because they think we're selling them something? And the other kid's like, what would we be selling? And that's the end. It's kind of supposed to be, I think, the creators are making a joke with what the kids are saying.
Yeah.
And then the movie ends.
Yeah. So, what I take away from this film isn't what a lot of people take away, like, holy shit, look how awful these kids have it. I'm more along the lines of, wow, I'm really glad I don't know a lot of people that are like that. Like, it's kind of interesting because you watch this and you get really outraged and you get annoyed, but I don't know one child like that. I don't know one.
That's good. I think, and I hope, and I this is especially a sort of a problem in the South.
Yeah.
I'm hoping it's a group that's getting smaller and smaller as time goes on. And
I think it is.
And polls would show that it probably is. I think there'll always be fringe religious extremists anywhere, especially in the United States. But I like to think that they're not as big as they used to be, and in the future they'll be even smaller.
Yeah.
And in case any of you are wondering, the camp, after this movie came out, closed down because of so many negative calls, which is kind of interesting.
And probably a good thing.
Yeah. Although she is trying to work on more stuff. She has a whole website which you can go to. Maybe you can contact the woman and tell her what you think of it. I don't know. I wouldn't, but yeah, you might want to.
So I actually recommend watching this a lot.
It's a great documentary.
A lot of people, like, you mentioned it on Twitter, and people are just like, barf, couldn't even finish. And it's like, just watch it. Just bear it, because it's better to experience it and see what happens in the most extreme versions of, what's going on, rather than ignore it. Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah, sure, it pisses you off a little bit, and it, makes you sad for the kids, and it's frustrating, but it's a really good film.
Yeah.
This is the second time I've seen it. The first time I was very annoyed. The second time, because I knew it was happening, I didn't have that shock factor. I enjoyed it.
Good movie. Yeah.
Yeah.
Feel bad for those kids, though. I hope, I hope it's okay. And you did say that the mullet kid when he grew up.
Yeah. You can look up YouTube videos. Just look up Levi Jesus Camp in the YouTube search bar or something. And you'll find interviews of him after he talks. And he talks about what happened after the Jesus Camp shit and stuff. And he got a haircut, which is good, and he still preaches, and he likes Harry Potter. And
yeah, he saw Harry Potter. Good for him. That's a step. Yeah. Step in the right direction.
So I would give this 8.5 mullets out of 10, as far as documentaries are concerned.
I would give the movie. I'd give it 7.5 Becky Fisher insulin shots. Not quite as much as you, but I still thought it was good. It's worth watching.
Yeah. And if you guys have seen it before, let us know. Let us know how you what you thought about it. If you haven't seen it, go watch it on Netflix. You can stream it whenever you want, or rent it, or whatever you do on the internet that you shouldn't do.
Yeah, so thanks everyone for watching. If you have any recommendations for movies for us to watch, go ahead and do that in the comments, because we've already gotten some suggestions, but it's always good to get more.
Suggestion.
Yeah. So, if you want to, you can follow us on Twitter at Hugo Reloaded.
Or at Bible Reloaded.
If you want to, you can donate to our Patreon page.
Yeah.
Which we are almost to our first goal of $500.
Yay.
So do that. Until next time, though, I'm Hugo.
And I'm Jake.
And this has been The Bible Reloaded.